welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 180, and today's date is October 4th, 2013, and the title of this episode is DC preparing for a cataclysmic event of epic proportion? And what we saw happen in DC, we saw a woman with a child surrounded by police with guns. Now remind you, this woman was unarmed. There was a child in the car. The police had her surrounded. They did have the ability to shoot out her tires. They did have the ability to call in other cars to block her in there. They did have the ability to break her window in the back, to grab hold of her. They had many different options. Instead, they let her leave. They pursued her and then shot her in cold blood. And the corporate media is pushing this and saying, oh, they did their job, is a great thing. We have Congress out there saying this is fantastic, but I'm sorry. The last course of action is shooting when someone doesn't shoot back. There are many other options, and these police officers are trained to do many other things before they shoot and kill, especially when there's a child and a woman who does not pose a threat, did not have a gun. And if you look at the video, when they had her surrounded, they had the story that she crashed into the barrier and she was trying to get into the White House. But if you look at the front of the car, there was no damage. How did she crash into a barrier with no damage? The only damage you see is when she was backing up, pulling away. And they did have many other opportunities and other tactics they could have used, but what they're doing is they want to see how people react. How are you reacting that a woman with a child was shot in cold blood and killed? Now this child does not have a mother at this time. We see the corporate media praising this. We see Congress applauding this. Secondly, you see the drill taking place in D.C. What are they preparing for? We understand that truckers are arriving in October to ask President Obama to step down, and they're stopping deliveries for 3 days. We have another protest happening in November where I think it's Larry Klayman is coming down to Washington, and he wants everyone to come down there and descend on D.C. to ask for Obama to resign. So are they preparing for something that might happen? Are they looking to make sure they have the ability to lock down the city? You heard, I don't know if everyone heard this, you heard on the loudspeakers, and actually it sounded like a movie set, everyone stay in your homes, lock your doors, stay away from the windows, do not come outside. They had Congress debating at the same time, and they were rushed and put into safety. Police surrounding the Capitol building and all the other areas were locked down, ready to move. And to me, it seemed like a preparation for something to come. Now, before I get started with the economic collapse news, I just want to say that one of the listeners of X22report.com sent me a song called Mousetrap, which he wrote, and he performed it and recorded it. And at the end of this report, I'm going to play it. I'm going to put the link on the site for YouTube, so you can go to the video for it if you'd like to do that. So after the report, stick around and listen to his music about what's going on right now in the world. Now, let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to go out to Greece, and their jobless rate, they're predicting right now, is going to hit 34% by 2016. Now, it could go higher because right now they are on track to hit 29% by the end of the year. Currently, it's at 27%, and they're expecting it to be at 31.5% by 2014. Now, if the economy in Greece which when they first got the first bailout, they told us everything was fixed, everything's great. How is the unemployment continually going up? It makes no sense. Greece is continually taking on more debt, laying off more people. They have less revenue coming into the country, but they have more interest payments on their debt and more debt. So what do you see? You see something that cannot be sustained, and it's rearing its evil head right now. And Greece is on the verge of a complete collapse. They can continually fund in money to try to keep the country going, but it is collapsing and imploding right now. Here in America, the economic growth gauge slips, and it slipped to a 4-week low, and it looks like things are not getting better. And there are also reports coming out because of this debate over the shutdown. Fourth quarter is really not looking good, and this could have catastrophic repercussions down the line. Now we see because of this shutdown, Lockheed is going to furlough 3,000 workers. And because of the housing industry, there are also reports that say that the housing industry might not be able to sustain itself now because of the shutdown. If you notice, we had this vibrant, fantastic economy. Unemployment was dropping. Housing was booming. The government was spending all of their money before the fiscal year ended for them, which was September 30th. And now all of a sudden, for a couple of days of the government with pre-shutdown, they are talking about all this bad news of how the economy is going to crumble. And right now, we know the housing industry is not sustainable. What they really want is they really want the American people to believe that the economy is taking a downturn because of what's happening right now. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the economy was already taking a downturn. This is the distraction, the cover-up, to take away of what's really going on. And if you notice today, the stock market, and it's Friday, and this normally happens on Friday, the stock market was down during the first, second days of the shutdown, and then just magically, the stock market closes in the green, and gold is again suppressed. Now, we know things are not going well because in the past I told you the housing market, Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, all laying off thousands of people, and mortgage applications are declining, and I've discussed this before. But now we see another mortgage company, PHH Mortgage, is laying off a third of its workforce. That's 365 more people. If the economy and the housing is booming, why all the layoffs in the mortgage industry? It makes no sense. The only sense it makes is the housing recovery was fake. Now it's declining. They can't keep it up the way they have been, and it's completely falling apart, and that is what makes sense. Now, MarketWatch asked the Treasury if they would consider using some of the country's gold to pay the bills if the budget crisis escalates later this month. And the Treasury said that they consider it, but they're not going to do it. Now, their reasoning is that if we use the gold, it would send a wave of uncertainty throughout the world, and it would show that the U.S. had to resort to their gold reserves to fix the situation. But if you remember, when Ron Paul was questioning the Fed about gold, he said it was relic, it's not important. But here, they're making it that it is important. Very confusing. Or is it? The real reason I think that they will never go to use the reserve, the gold in Fort Knox, and they will never use it, is because it really isn't there. And if they said they were going to use it and they actually would have to go down to get it, there would be nothing there to use. And that, I believe, is the real problem. And let me just read, I'll just read the part. The Treasury has considered that option among the many others and rejected it. Selling gold would undercut confidence in the U.S., both here and abroad, and would be destabilizing to the world financial system. But it's kind of confusing because they're trying to tell us that gold is unimportant. It's a relic. It's not really money. But in this statement, they're telling us that gold is very important, that it's part of the financial system, that it would undercut confidence. And it's very flip-floppy in what they perceive gold as. And we all know what gold is. It's real money. I don't believe the Fed, the U.S., has any gold anymore. I believe it has been shipped off, moved away, because they understand that is real money, and the Fed and the central bankers have already taken it, and it's no longer around. Now, there is a report out there saying that banks are stuffing ATMs with 20 to 30% more cash in case of a panic withdrawals, and they see that the shutdown goes a lot longer than they expected, and we hit that October 17th, 18th date, and the U.S. government defaults, and they cannot make any payments. So they are preparing the ATMs for a bank run. But I'm going to tell you right now, putting 20 to 30% more cash in the ATMs, that will be gone and drained in a matter of minutes if there is some type of bank run, and it will not be able they will not be able to keep up with the amount of people trying to get their money out. And it's just amazing that they're thinking in this way. So they must have got some type of notice or something that something might be occurring to take this type of precaution at this time. Now, we understand that the government shut down, and according to the daily Treasury statement for October 2nd, this is what happened, and this is how they pay their bills. And you can see how short the government is in paying their bills. October 2nd, which was released yesterday at 4 p.m., the Treasury spent a total of $63 billion in the first 2 days of fiscal 2014, which started on October 1st. At the same time, it only took in $25 billion in tax revenue. So they spent $63 billion, and they only took in $25 billion. Gee, not enough to pay their bills. Not enough to support all their programs. This is the major problem. The country is already bankrupt. The country is living off of credit card. Just like a person who brings in $40,000 a year and has $100,000 in debt of credit cards, they cannot make they cannot make the interest payments. So what do? They take out another credit card, which raises their debt ceiling for a certain period of time, and allows them to draw on that money to help make the payments on their bills. And this is what's happening in the United States right now. We've reached the point where the amount of money being brought in does not cover the bills that the government has. And where else do we see this? We see this in Greece. We see this in Cyprus. We see this in Spain, Portugal, Italy. We see it all over. What is the main difference? These other countries have to beg to get a bailout. Here in America, the Fed pushes a button and everything is fine. There's no begging. That is the only difference. And the Fed creates this money out of thin air, and everything, all problems are solved, except everyone goes into debt a little bit more, and there's more money to be paid back, and it doesn't fix the problem. And I hear Congress, the president, all these ridiculous people up there talking about the debt ceiling, going back and forth, and if you notice, not one person is talking about the real problem. We have a debt problem. We cannot pay our bills the way it is. We are continually borrowing to fill the gap. This is unsustainable. It cannot be sustained. At a certain time, this will implode. And let's just think about how bad this really is. President Obama is going to meet with the head of Goldman Sachs to talk about a payday loan of sorts. So what is he doing? He's going to Goldman Sachs and saying, listen, and it's almost like a person who has a family, or doesn't have a family, just living alone, can't make the payments on their bills, so they go to a loan shark. Listen, I'm looking to get some money here, and what are you going to charge me? Well, listen, I'll give you $5,000 at 40% interest. He's going to Goldman Sachs saying, listen, we can't make our payments in the government. I can't get any more credit. Can I get credit from you? Sure, you can borrow money from us, but it's going to be at 45% interest. This is what the government is resorting to? Instead of enacting the legislation in the Constitution to coin their own money. So they rather go to Goldman Sachs, get a loan from them at high interest to help with the government problem, instead of pushing the Fed aside and the government printing their own money with no interest, with no loan, with no debt. Does it make any sense to anybody? Doesn't make any sense to me. But again, all these guys up there are not talking about the real problem the U.S. has. Okay, now, talking about problems, let's go to Obamacare for a second here. Now, John McAfee saying, who put this Obamacare website together? This is a hacker's wet dream. This site is so hackable that it could steal anyone's information. They can set up a duplicate site that looks just like it, have people enter their information, and steal all their personal information. The only difference between the two sites, the Obamacare site and the hacker site that they make to duplicate it, the hacker site will probably work compared to where Obamacare site will not. But this is a complete problem. It is the whole Obamacare is a complete monstrosity. It is a complete and utter disastrous situation. We've already seen information has been stolen. People's private information has already been stolen, and this is not going to turn out well. Now, I don't know if everyone realized this, but when Obamacare was voted in and everyone said yes, and of course, the House didn't read it, the Senate didn't read it, nobody really read it, because, Pelosi was out there saying that, if you want to know what's in it, you got to vote for it first. That makes sense. So no one really read it, and now they're all waking up going, holy crap, what the hell do we do? We went ahead, we passed this legislation. It is the worst thing that we've ever seen in our lives. This is not for the people. The staffers in Congress were complaining. Obama swooped down and said, don't worry, we will take care of you because we know it's very expensive. You can't afford it. It's really not helping you in any way. So the government will pay for your premiums, and you pick the plan you want, and all the staffers went ahead and picked the top-notch plan because all the other ones suck. That's pretty much what it is. But every Senate Democrat voted in favor of exempting themselves from Obamacare. Don't you find that interesting that they wanted to be exempted from this Obamacare monstrosity that's not for the people, that is penalizing everyone and making everyone a slave to work for this thing that they put out there, and it really doesn't give you additional health services because the person and the deductibles are so high, you will never get any benefits unless you're critically ill, admitted to a hospital on your deathbed, and you first pay off, whatever the deductible is, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000. Only then will you actually receive the benefits of whatever plan you're on. Otherwise, you're just paying every month for nothing, because if you go to a doctor, you've got to pay because you got to reach that deductible. Okay, now Netanyahu is still out there, and he's still using the propaganda, and he's appealing to the Iranian people, saying to stop their government from developing nuclear weapons, and he's continually doing this. Iran, inside the country, they are protesting against the U.S. and Israel for making threats against Iran, and they blamed Obama for repeating the military threat against Iran despite Tehran's call for peace and dialogue with the West. And first of all, the United States, Israel central bankers, they do not want peace. They never wanted this. Their plan and their continued plan is to somehow, some way, get some type of war started. It might look like peace right now, but you're going to see things ramp up very soon. Kerry and Hagel were out there saying U.S. won't be fooled into Iran deal, and aiming to reassure Israel and hawkish U.S. Congress against the serious prospect of deal with Iran. Secretary of State John Kerry and Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel downplaying the talks while saying they were virtually obliged to explore Iran's offer of diplomacy, but Hagel out there saying and insisting that this engagement was worthwhile, but it didn't mean the same thing as negotiation, and the U.S. is still in the mode of sanctions and having the U.S. go in and see if they have nuclear weapons, and if they do not get rid of their nuclear weapons, there could be further sanctions on the way, which we know that's what's going to happen, but the shutdown is kind of hampering the additional sanctions right now. Now, we understand back in August, Syria was hit with a chemical attack, and the United States was building up to attack Syria at this time, and the whole thing was diffused by Russia coming up with a deal, and Assad agreeing to relinquish all his chemical weapons, which they're in the process of doing. They came up with a UN resolution, and we're seeing stories now coming out that it was Saudi black op teams backed by the U.S. that planned and executed the plan to gas people in the area using sarin. And based on data from a number of sources, a picture can be pieced together now. The criminal provocation in eastern Ghouta was done by a black op team that the Saudis sent through Jordan to do this. And these allegations mirror a number of early reports which pointed to Saudi Arabia as the mastermind behind the sarin gas attacks. So the whole entire story of the use, saying it was the use of chemical weapons, was Assad, is completely falling apart at this time, and we can see now that this was a complete plan by the U.S. to get, and the central bankers in Israel, to get into Syria to remove Assad. And Susan Rice has come out and said and that the resolution that they have with Russia and Syria doesn't say Assad as an individual, that the U.S. cannot, the U.S. can still go in and remove him, because in the resolution it says the government of Syria, not Assad the individual. So we can still see they're trying to maneuver and get Assad out of there and replace him with a puppet government, so they can put the U.S. dollar in as the reserve currency, take control of their natural resources, and we understand that Iran and Syria have a treaty, and the U.S., Israel, central bankers would then move their operation to get into Iran and do the same exact thing, because Iran is the grand surprise. Now, we can see why the CIA and the government, even during the shutdown, is sending over aid, arms, and training over to the Free Syrian Army, Al-Qaeda, the militants, the moderates, whatever you want to call them. It's because they are on the verge of collapse. They're deteriorating. Their internal rifts, they're falling apart, and the U.S. government, CIA, is trying to keep them all together, retrain them to continue with the battle, because this is not over by any stretch of the imagination. Their whole entire plan is to get into Syria and get rid of Assad, then move into Iran. And what's happening here is that they will not stop until they get this done. Now, there is a report out there saying that internet freedom is on the decline worldwide, and we can see that our freedoms on the internet have been removed because now the NSA is spying on all internet activity, and your freedom has been reduced, along with, they did a survey out of 60 countries. 34 out of 60 countries it surveyed suffered from a fallout in internet freedom over the past year. And the U.S. was put into this mix because of what Edward Snowden revealed, that the NSA is spying and has surveillance on the internet and actually does have control, and especially now that Obama has executive orders that allows him to take over the internet. If he declares there's an emergency in the U.S., he can shut everything down at a moment's notice without the permission of Congress and keep everything down, I think, for 12 months or so. So we can see that this report is not just for countries like China, Iran, and other countries. The U.S. is being put into the mix now. Now, Adobe has been hacked. And 2.9 million customers' data has been breached. They've stolen their credit cards. They downloaded the encrypted files and broke the encryption. And now they have all of these people's information. And talking about cyber attacks, Leon Panetta was out there again saying that the U.S. government failing to prepare for a cyber Pearl Harbor. He's saying that the government and businesses are not working together to prevent this. And he went on to say that the U.S. government failure to work with businesses is leaving the country critical infrastructure open to a crippling cyber Pearl Harbor attack. And he said he's never seen in all my time that Washington and businesses continually screwing up what they need to do. And in the past, I've described the potential happening of a cyber Pearl Harbor, an attack that devastates our critical infrastructure and paralyzes our nation. We need better defenses to confront these threats. And he went on to say that he added that the threat posed by state-sponsored hackers is not limited to government departments, and the country has already mitigated attempts on critical infrastructure areas. And we've seen this from many other places, and he said this before, and they continually to raise this point that the infrastructure of the United States and many other countries are completely vulnerable to cyber attacks. And he went on to say that most of the infrastructure has outdated software that completely leaves them open to attack. And this is why they're putting together this drill in November to test the power grid infrastructure against cyber attacks, against physical attacks. And this could be a huge potential false flag. And just to remind everyone, when I say this could be a false flag, and I bring up there's over 1,000 banks now, cyber attack drill coming up in October this month. We have the trucker strike going on. We have the power grid drill going on. And when I say potential, what has happened in the past, every time some type of false flag happens, there's always a drill that corresponds to the attack. We saw this in Boston. there was a bomb drill going on. We saw this in 9/11. The Air Force was running a drills. That's why the planes were off someplace else doing something else. FEMA was on the ground a day before, and we can see this, and this is why we call attention to these drills, because every time when there's huge agencies cooperating in something like this, something usually goes wrong. And most of the time what I think is happening, most of the people think that there is a drill, and people who are in the inside say, okay, it's a go. This is no longer a drill. Let's have the real thing happen. But the people who are working there don't understand that the real thing is happening, and it turns out to be real. And we see this power grid going down in November. There's FEMA there. There's DHS there. Power grids from across the country. All the states are cooperating in this, and we can see this is a major, major thing that could happen. We've also had the Quantum 2 drill that happened back in July or August. I think it was July, and that was in preparation to have training if there is a cyber attack on the financial institutions. And now we're having all of these banks join in with a drill with a cyber attack happening in October. So these two things that are happening, we can see something major, major happening during this time period. And especially what just happened in D.C., I mean, from everything that I see and all the reports that I read and people that are submitting to me, I see that this completely looked like some type of preparation for something catastrophic to happen, and they are going through and training to make sure they are ready for what is coming. And there are many things happening now. We see them materializing, and like I said, the cyber attack, the false flag event with a nuke or a chemical weapon type of event happening, we can definitely see this happening in the next month or two coming into this late fall, early winter. The central bankers, the Fed, had the event ready for Syria. That didn't happen. So now they're delayed a little bit. They're regrouping. Their plan is still on the table. They know what they have to do. They understand the collapse is coming, and they understand that they can never, ever taper. It's an impossibility. So they are trying to figure out a way, and you can see they're building the propaganda right now. The propaganda before the end of the fiscal year was the economy is thriving, getting better, housing is moving up, unemployment's going down, GDP going up. This is all an illusion, of course, because they manipulate all the numbers. Now they're saying because of the shutdown, as we go further and further, day after day, it could have catastrophic events, and it doesn't look like the economy in the fourth quarter will be able to do as well as they believed it should. They also see that housing will start to decline now. This has nothing to do with the shutdown at this point. This has to do with because they knew that all of this was completely fake. And you have to remember, the Fed pumps up the stock market, high-frequency traders, plunge protection team to keep the markets up. They feed the banks with $85 billion a month to put back into the stock market to keep it pumped up. And this whole thing is a complete illusion. They're not waiting for unemployment to come down, because if they really wanted to, they can just manipulate the numbers. The numbers are manipulated anyhow, so what's the difference? Why are they even waiting? The whole thing is they're waiting for a certain event to happen because they do not want to be blamed for what is coming. And they'll always push the blame onto someone else. They'll lie, cheat, they don't care. It makes no difference. And this is how we can see that something is definitely happening. There's been, this drill type of thing happening in D.C. They wanted to see the people's reaction by shooting a mother in cold blood, and they wanted to see what the reaction would be from the American people. They wanted to see if they were able to lock down D.C. for what is coming. We see all these drills happening, so in the next couple of weeks, we are going to see something major happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. And don't forget, stay tuned. Right after this, you're going to hear Mousetrap by Ron, and I'll put the links on the site. Thanks a lot.
Rich get richer, poor get more true.